Hello and welcome. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Andrew Freed, a real estate entrepreneur who broke free from the traditional narrative of the corporate world to chase his dreams of financial freedom. Andrew started out on the conventional path, but after a profound realization, he began to question the 30 to 40-year rat race and consider a leap towards financial freedom in the next decade. Andrew dove into real estate investing, and in just 2 years, he's acquired an impressive portfolio, including multifamily properties, syndications, and joint ventures, amassing a total of 95 units. His approach involved a combination of innovative strategies, including house hacking, syndication, and leveraging lines of credit for liquidity. Not content with personal success, Andrew is on a mission to share his knowledge and passion for creative financing, project management, house hacking, and multifamily investing with others. Andrew's ultimate goal extends beyond borders. He aspires to travel the world and empower thousands to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. This is an episode you won't want to miss. Andrew, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. And what a fantastic introduction. I'm going to bring you to every meeting. I'm going to have you introduce every meeting like that. That was amazing.
Awesome. Well, to get started, would you maybe just give us a little bit of background about your journey from how you made this transition from more of a traditional W-2 track to realizing that financial freedom could be something you could achieve in the next 10 years and kind of what your inspiration was for that?
Absolutely. So originally, I was tricked into the narrative that I should go after my American dream, get a good job, get a good education, get a job at a good company, make six figures, right? And I achieved all of that during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to the realization that, even on this path, it's still going to be 30, 40 more years of work until I don't have to do this anymore. And that frightened me more than really just taking out a line of credit on the equity I did have and taking a shot at it now. Worst case, I would retire at 30, 35, 40 years anyway. So why not take a shot at it now? And that's exactly what I did. And in 3 years, I went from like 1 to 127 units, just closing 32 units recently.
Congrats, that's awesome.
Thank you. And that was my journey. That was my journey. And it's been a fun journey. It's been a journey of self-discovery and self-improvement. And that's what I think many people don't realize is real estate is less about real estate and it's more about learning about yourself and self-improvement. And the more you work on that, the more success will follow you.
I love that. That has definitely been true to my experience so far as well. It has been so much more of a journey of like self-discovery than I ever anticipated. It's not just like a different job. The more you know yourself, the more growth potential you have, which is, really unlimited.
And the more delegation you can do and only sit in the areas where you want to sit in, right?
Absolutely. I've definitely been trying to do more digging on sort of like identifying what is that like unique ability that only I can bring. And then what are the tasks that I'm doing that I'm capable of doing them, but should I be doing them? Or maybe I should be letting other people do those things so that I can focus on the things that only I can do. So that's been a really fun and exciting journey so far.
Absolutely. Pareto's principle at its finest.
Yep. So I want to dig a little bit deeper. You mentioned that you kind of had sort of this epiphany that happened as you reached a point where you sort of had checked all the boxes in your pursuit of the American dream, but you still weren't feeling like this is, I've arrived, like this is it. This is what I want to do for the next 30, 40 years. What, were there any particular things that you were exposed to or that kind of helped you have that shift in perspective?
I mean, what I would say is, by all accounts, I lived a great life, right? But by the time I went home from work, I felt empty. I felt like I wasn't really going after my purpose, And I used vices like video games to escape that feeling. Thankfully, during COVID, I found Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it kind of opened my eyes to really what I was running away from was my ambition and trying to go after my dream and not a path that somebody else laid out for me. And that really opened my eyes, and that led me into kind of bigger pockets, led me into books, led me into going into meetups, starting my own meetup, getting a mentor, house hacking, lines of credit, syndication. So it was all just a path on kind of figuring out why I wanted to escape the journey that I was on. And now I can say that I do live a life with purpose, and I don't have that feeling when I come home from work at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that is such a key point to hone in on is like we're all sort of missing that initially when we go into that pursuit of the American dream. It's like these expectations that everyone else has for what our life is supposed to look like. And most of us, I think, don't have that opportunity early on where somebody is asking that question or encouraging us to ask ourselves that question of like, what do you want to do? Like, what brings you joy? Like, what gets you excited about waking up every day? It's more of like, no, this is what you're supposed to do. And trying to get to a place where we feel comfortable doing something other than that is it's a difficult place to get to. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share a little bit more. You mentioned mentorship. What types of different places did you go to kind of seek out mentorship from people who could help you on this journey?
People should be very careful about who they take advice from, right? Like, say, for example, I want plumbing advice. I'm going to go to a plumber. I'm not going to go to my stepdad for plumbing advice. That's completely the wrong person to take advice. And when people get started in real estate, who are the first people they go to for their advice? Their family and their
Friends
friends,
and
right?
family, right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
And other than most of them owning their primary residence, they have no experience in real estate. Yet you take their advice to heart. Like, in my opinion, you got to talk with somebody who actually buys real estate, who's in the game, and get their advice, right? So that's number one, is take advice from the right source and ignore advice from the wrong source. Like, that's number one. And then how I got started on my journey, Bigger Pockets was instrumental in the books, the podcast, Brandon Turner, all that community. I got active on the forums, ended up on the podcast. It was very instrumental for sure. In regards to finding a mentor, I found a local mentor that was buying hundreds of units of multifamily. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I found him at a meetup, and the way I thought I could bring myself into his world is bring him value. And during one meetup, he does like a virtual meetup, and he wanted to host a meetup in Worcester, which was my market. I owned about like 6 units at that point there. And I said, and that weekend, I took the initiative to go to 5 different venues, get the pricing, get the manager's contact information, get pictures, put it in a nice little drive, sent it to him. And from there, he started the meetup, and he actually gave it to me to host. And then from there, I became an agent on his brokerage, and eventually became a GP in a syndication with him, right? But the reason why all that worked for me is because I led with value, and I didn't expect anything in return. And that's kind of what's led to my success, is just leading with value and expecting nothing, and the world just provides. So
Yeah, I love that mentality. And I think like you can't go wrong when you start from that approach. And I think when we're starting out, sometimes it's hard to know what that might look like. But when we start putting ourselves out there and at least start networking with other people and asking those questions about what are they doing, what are their challenges, what are their pain points, and through that information figuring out like what is a need that they have that you have the skills, knowledge, and abilities to fulfill, even though you don't have a ton of background in real estate yet. At that time you knew how to connect people and kind of how to get that started, and finding ways that we can add value for others is a great way to kind of get in there and build those relationships sort of organically without approaching it from a perspective of just showing up and being like, oh, what can I get out of this? How can you help me? But how can I help you? And I think that that's such a great foundational place to approach, regardless of what venue, you're in, whether it's learning how to do real estate or any other new venture. It's like, how can you add value and kind of grow together?
exactly. I mean, you bring up a good point when it comes to organic growth. It's like every partner that I have, like, I've grown that relationship organically over 6, 12 months, a year, 2 years, seeing them in action. And that's why it's really important to get out there, to go to meetups, because you're not going to just partner with somebody when you first meet them. It's a marriage. It's something that you have to grow a familiarity with somebody and their ethics and their values and what they're looking for, and see if it's a good match before you essentially get in the bed with them, right? So that's why putting in the reps, consistency is really important in real estate. It's all about, in my opinion, organic growth, like building credibility, building those relationships, and building that network.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about how you did that initially and how you got started. I know you mentioned that the very first thing you did once you decided you were kind of going to go down this path and you wanted to take action was that you used some equity that you already had and used that as sort of your jumping off point. Can you talk a little bit about more of the details of how you did that?
Absolutely. So come around 2000 and COVID was 2020. I took a look at my net worth and I realized that 80% of my net worth was locked up in this condo I bought 5 years ago, $200,000. And it took me 10 years to save up $50,000. And that just dumbfounded me. I'm like, I'm never gonna get where I need to be if it takes me 10 years to save up half a year of living expenses, right?
Mhm.
Like, so at that point I decided, okay, what can I do to turn my net worth into things that actually provide cash flowing assets? Because right now, I have this $250,000 net worth that's providing me zero cash flow, zero dividends, zero zero path to financial independence. So at that point, I decided I was going to take out a HELOC, a 200K line of credit on my one bedroom condo, and I used that to buy my next 6 or 7 deals. I house hacked a couple properties, bought into a syndication as a limited partner or a passive investor, which sold a year later, and I arbitraged that into buying a 5 unit with a partner. Split a couple 6 units like 3 ways with a couple people, and then at that point, once I ran out of my own money, that's when these larger deals started to come across my desk, and then I decided to me and my partners decided to capital raise and take
Mhm.
down some larger properties. So that's kind of been my ascension through kind of building my portfolio in real estate.
I love it. As someone who just closed last week on my first fourplex house hack, I would love to hear some more like nitty gritty granular details on like, do you have any lessons learned you can share from, those first few endeavors that you got into, things that you maybe would have done differently or
Mhm.
things that worked really well?
Well, congratulations. It's a fantastic first step.
Thanks.
Four family house hack. Four families are rare. They're super rare. So you got a good one for sure. Um, One thing you're gonna want to do if this is your first house hack is check every toilet, whether it's a leaky toilet or not. And that doesn't mean that it's actually leaking. That means that it's wasting water in the drain, which can 4, 3, 4, 5x your water bill, right? So check for leaky toilets. An easy way is to do food coloring on the top of it and see if it feeds into the bottom hole, or just get a new toilet. It's really cheap, 100,
Mm,
150 bucks, 50 bucks to replace. That's number one. Number two, I would say establish expectations upfront with your tenant and lead with value. And what I mean by that is like go meet your tenant in person, see if there's anything you can do to address any issues that haven't been addressed. Usually it's something small like a broken window or a faucet. That, and more or less, that's just buying your goodwill and buying your
mhm,
credibility. And then at that point, if you are going to enact a rent raise, try to use like a psychological trick that I call the binder strategy, where
mhm.
more or less you're trying to get the tenant to propose the rent increase and not you.
Yeah.
So say for example, if the rent's 1,000, the market's 2,000, you give them the comps, I get 2,000 for this, you're paying 1,000, what do you think makes sense? Human nature to go to the 50% market, and that's your expectation. And if they say, how about 1,500? You say, that's great, let's do that. And because they proposed it, their buy-in to this new rent is way higher,
Yeah.
right? Like if I propose a solution, I'm gonna do it. Like if you propose a solution, you're not gonna do it. That's just strange. Like, so that's a really good strategy to kind of increase rents as well as take an empathetic approach and have your tenants like you. Because at the end of the day, like people want to do business with people they like in that trust, and that conforms to tenants as well.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. I definitely have heard of the binder strategy before. So I was really fortunate that this building was fully occupied. And so I actually had to have the seller do a lease buyout with one of the tenants so that I can actually move into it. So I have a little bit of runway to kind of build that rapport with them before we start having those conversations about raising rents for when their leases are up. So I definitely think binder strategy sounds like a great way to approach that.
My other recommendation would be get your team in order. And what I mean
Hmm.
by that is find your go-to electrician, find your go-to handyman, find your go-to plumber. Try to get 2 or 3 of each trade and put it in a shared Google Doc, right? A Google Excel doc. And what that is doing is that's going to have a repository for all of your trades. But later on, when you scale, then you can hand that doc off to a VA or somebody else who can manage the tenants for you, right? Because at the end
Hmm.
of the day, like most of the issues that you get calls for are repair related. Like,
Yeah.
and about 70% are plumbing related, 20 to 30% electrical. So your plumber is going to be your best friend.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a great recommendation. I love that. Thank you. Let's see. I would love to hear a little bit more about how you made your transition from those first few initial properties that you did where you were using your own capital to kind of, how did you actually start that scaling process?
One word, partnerships. Prior to partnerships, I owned about 10 units outright. I got them through HELOCs, house hacking, like whatever I could to scrounge it up to get the units. And then at that point, I kind of maxed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran across a fiveplex. That was a great deal. Like three plexes in the area go for 600. This was a fiveplex, and it went for it was listed for 650. It was a great deal, but I didn't have the money to take it down. I didn't want it to slip through my fingers, so I decided to call somebody that I thought would be a good partner and pitch it to him, and they were all on board. And from there, it opened my eyes to delegation. It opened my eyes to focusing on your strengths and delegating your weaknesses, and that really allowed me to grow. My partner Zach, he makes up a lot of my weaknesses, and he pushes me. Like we go for these larger deals, and I'm like scared, but I have my partner pushing forward, and it really pushes me
Mm-hmm.
to go to bounds that I didn't think were possible. So, like I would say, partnerships and allowing others to push you, as well as like figuring out how to delegate. Because at a certain point, you max out. Like I was a one-man army when I had my 10 units, and I did way more work than what I do now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really easy, especially like I think I'm sort of in that space right now where I've been starting to build things and I find myself feeling really busy because I'm still doing a lot of the active work on so many pieces of the business because I've sort of been building that foundation. And I want to start scaling, but I don't feel like I have any bandwidth left to do anything else. And so it's been highlighting that piece of like, okay, like if I want to continue to grow, I'm going to have to start bringing in those partners, whether it's hiring a VA or, something along those lines, to have that sort of support team that's doing some of the tasks that take a lot of my time, but don't necessarily add a lot of direct value to my business, where I can be focusing more on, talking with investors or finding deals or, those pieces that kind of really will help the business to elevate to the next level.
Start with what don't you want to do in managing a deal? What do you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then think of people in your network who are good at what you don't want to do. They're great. They're amazing. They're superheroes at what you don't want to do. Take a couple deals down with them. See how it works out. See if it makes sense. I think most likely you'll come to realize that you have way more free time in your hands because you're focusing on what you love to do, and then the things you don't like to do that take away energy that you dread, that you push off every single day, are taken care of by somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And then at that point, once you start scaling and find the ability to stay in what you like to do, at that point you have to like look internally, do like a daily audit of like what takes energy away from you, what gives energy.
Mm-hmm.
And once you figure out what takes energy away from you, hire virtual assistants to take that off your plate. I'll just give you a quick example. Bookkeeping took energy away from me. Social media took energy away from me. Data entry took energy away from me. And those are some of the first things that I decided to delegate, right? And then at that point, yeah, I mean, you just keep doing that, just keep refining the delegation until, I mean, the ultimate goal is you do nothing. Like that's the ultimate goal, right? Yeah. But it's a slow progression. It's a step. It's not like it happens overnight. It's you build, it's a foundation, and then you build the walls, and you build the roof. Like
Mm-hmm.
so, it's a constant progression on how you kind of create the life or create the work schedule you want to live.
Yeah, I really love what you said there about the energy audit. And I think that's really applicable, not just for those of us who are doing real estate investing, but is something that anyone can really take away and apply in their own personal life. We all have those like tasks and things that we have to do around the house that just like really suck energy from us.
Yep.
And so whether that's looking at like hiring somebody to mow your lawn or hiring somebody to help do laundry or other housekeeping tasks or watch the kids for a couple hours so that you can do something that gives you energy instead of takes energy, like all of those things can really help you grow in your own personal life and, whatever endeavors you're trying to do, whether they're specifically in real estate or not. And I think that's something that, is a good takeaway for anybody, is like doing that energy audit to figure out like, what are those things that are really taking away and not adding to your life, and figuring out what the trade-off is where you can do that and then replace that with something that's going to bring you joy or add value and energy into your life. So that's a really awesome. I love that.
Dollar per hour task audit. Like, say for example, you make $50 an hour at your W-2 or being an agent or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're cleaning your floors for a $20 task that takes energy away from you. Like,
Yeah.
Put more hours into your work, pay it out. You'll make a $30 difference in an hourly wage if you do that. right? So that's another kind of mindset I like to look at, is like dollar per hour task. Like, is this worth my time, right? Because I mean, at this point in my career, my dollar per hour task is probably like 100, $150 by what I make per hour. So I do take that into consideration, even when like cleaning or, or even cooking. Like, I'll take that
Mhm.
into consideration when those decisions come in my mind.
Yeah, the food prep is definitely one of those that I've been wrestling with recently where, am I capable of like going to the grocery store and buying all the vegetables and stuff that I need for this healthy food that I'm supposed to be eating and then prepping all the food and getting it all organized? Sure. But I end up like cooking two separate meals every day, one for me, one for the rest of my family, because they eat different stuff than I do. It just becomes this whole production when for like, I don't know, $5 to $10 a meal, I can just buy already prepared, pre-measured, like created just the way that I want it to be food that's like ready to go and off the shelf and good for me. Like,
Yeah,
so I think
yeah.
there's so many different ways that we can apply that to create that space for us to really focus the limited time and energy that we do have on the things that are going to add value for us.
I work at W2 right now. I self-manage 24 units. I'm a GP in two syndications. I'm an investor-focused agent. I have three. I do a lot of stuff, right? But I have a team of 7 people that take away so much things from me that you'd be
Hmm.
surprised how little I do.
Yeah.
But it's all about systems. It's all about delegation. It's all about living with intention, you know?
Yeah, I want to dig a little bit deeper on two of those things that you just mentioned. One, systems. So, can you talk a little bit about some of the systems that you use to try to kind of orchestrate and keep all of those moving pieces organized?
Absolutely. So for property management, me and my team have a Slack, and we have a channel for each particular property. And we hired like this 18-year-old assistant property manager who takes tenant inquiries, coordinates repairs, does things of that nature. And we coordinate that with the Slack channel in conjunction with our contractor Rolodex. So he
Hmm.
knows who to reach out to if something happens, right? So right there alone takes so much work away from me. Regarding like bookkeeping, I use QuickBooks. I have everything feed into it, and I have a virtual assistant that does that for me. And every single month, I just reconcile based off what he does. So that's from the bookkeeping perspective. For my social media, I systematize that I try to shoot like 5 or 10 videos in one foul swoop. Go
Hmm.
one location, then give that to my social media VA and have her edit the video, have her do the captions. And my job is just simply at the end, just take the time to post it, which is 15, 20 minutes a day. Right. Like, so those are some systems I have in place. I have like a CRM for capital raising. I have all
Hmm.
my contacts in a CRM noted like investor or buyer or whatever. And that makes it incredibly easy if you're doing marketing. You could just send out one email I could send out an email to 10,000 people right now in one foul swoop. If I didn't have that CRM, that would be a 5-day task.
Yeah.
It's like, so these are just some systems that I have plenty more, but those are kind of some systems that come to the top of my head.
No, that's great. Thank you. I love what you talked about with specifically with social media. You mentioned batching. And I think batching is another one of those tools that's sort of easy to forget about or maybe is not top of mind for a lot of people. But when we can batch tasks together, it really helps to, come for, whether it's 1 hour or a couple of hours, you
Mm-hmm.
focus, you knock out all of those related tasks together, and then it's done instead of trying to like, with social media posts, like spending an hour a day or, 15 minutes a day or whatever it is to kind of come up with them in the moment and put it all together and post it. You, have a plan and get it all done at once. And then, on to the next thing. And I know a lot of people do that with food prep, so that's a good example. That's like a non-real estate related way to do batching, but, you spend a couple hours on Sunday afternoon, do all your meal prep for the week. That works for a lot of people to kind of get those tasks done and organized and off their plate. The other thing you mentioned that I want to talk a little bit more about is living with intention. Can you just talk about like what does that mean to you and how do you apply that in your daily life?
Let's give you a quick analogy. Imagine a tractor. Every mile it goes to the left a quarter of an inch. You know where that's going to end up at the end?
Nowhere near where it was originally on track for.
Back where it started, it'll eventually do a
Yeah.
circle,
Yeah.
right? So that's the same thing with living life with intention. If you just live your life and you don't do an audit of kind of your dreams, what are you doing each day to get you to your goal? Like a year from now, you're going to realize you're nowhere near where you want to be at the end of this journey, at the end of this path. And the way I really do that, the way I really dial in my intention on a daily basis is with the practice Miracle Morning. I probably
Mm-hmm.
spend about 2 to 3 hours every single morning to personal development and to education. And I use Miracle Morning, which is the acronym SAVERS: S for silence or meditation, A for affirmation, V for visualization, E for exercise, R for reading, S for scribing or journaling. And I do that every single morning. And then in the journaling, I make sure to write 3 things I'm grateful for, as well as kind of what are my 10-year goals, what are my 5-year goals, and what am I going to do today to get me closer to those goals, right? So I try to realign every single day on what I can do to get me closer to my goals. If I did that every month, I'd be a lot farther than where I am today, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love Hal Elrod and the Miracle Morning. I just really, I feel like I had heard about him a few years ago, but like I wasn't in a place where I was ready to receive it, And so, back in the spring, somebody was doing like a 30-day challenge for the Miracle Morning, and they invited me to do it with them. And I was like, oh yeah, this sounds interesting. I'm going to check it out. And I mean, it really is life-changing when you start each day with intention about like, what is it that I want to accomplish today, and how does this align with like the bigger goals that I have for myself and my family and what we're trying to accomplish. It really does. You can see how quickly your trajectory is able to change when you're being intentional about it versus just sort of like going through the motions of, whatever the day happens to put in your path, versus like approaching the day with that intention of like, these are the things that I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing them, and this is how it's moving me towards my big goals. So yeah, I would second the vote for Hal Elrod and the Miracle Morning. And I use his app. I'm not sure if you use the app or if you kind of have your own way of going through the savers, but the app has like things that are as short as like 6 minutes and as long as like 20, 30, 40 minutes, depending on how much time you have to do it. And I love that there's that flexibility, that it doesn't have to be this all or nothing, like either you give an hour to your personal development in the morning or don't bother doing it. Like you can do a lot in as little as 6 to 10 minutes. So yeah, Miracle Morning is awesome. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I know you mentioned that you still work as a real estate agent, and you specialize in helping investors who are looking for properties. Can you talk about maybe some trends that you're currently seeing in the market? And if you have any advice to buyers that are currently looking for investment properties?
So for trends, I would say that at least in Massachusetts, where the supply is really low, so the prices have kept up. Things that are priced right, in good condition, sell quickly, at least in my market in Worcester, Massachusetts, which that's what I specialize in.
Mhm.
Regarding getting properties under contract, I personally think transparency is key when it comes to dealing with sellers. And what I mean by that is usually just, offer your best, make the inspection information, only take that into account in your numbers, so you're not going to retrade them, and just reflect that you're going to be an easy person to work with, right? Because whenever somebody mentions a real estate transaction, everybody cringes to the stress, right? So if you can go out of your way to make it transparent that your goal is to, be straightforward, be honest, make this as transparent as possible, it makes everybody's life a lot easier, and the seller ends up leaving the deal happier, which results in more deals down the road. People always forget that people, that your relationship, your brand carries, right? If you're known to be somebody who's tough to deal with, and that seller has more properties down the road, you make another offer, and after you grinded the person down, you think they're going to accept it? I wouldn't. I own property, right? So, you gotta think about that when putting offers in and during the transaction.
Yeah, that's a really great point, that particularly when you're approaching this as an investor, it's different than when you're buying your primary home that you're probably going to live in for the next, 10, 15 years or whatever. Like you're not going to turn around and try to buy another one right away, where you need to be as sensitive to like the impression that you leave on people for working with you again in the future. And so having that open, like you said, the transparency to be honest and straightforward, and not try to like nickel and dime every little piece and cut down the price as you go through the process, to give a fair price and then work with that, I think makes a lot of sense, and is something that many of us probably don't think about when we're first getting started, because we're used to more of the negotiation style that you would be using when purchasing just your primary home.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of good points. Just to add to that point, for the larger deals, your ability to close is actually more important than how much money you're giving, right?
Mhm.
So it's really important to reflect that early on and to keep that throughout your investing career, in my opinion. If you're known to not close, like you're gonna get a really bad reputation in real estate.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've definitely heard that multiple times as I've kind of gotten into the syndication space this year is like, if you can show that you're going to close, like you can beat out other better offers if if your reputation and the partners that you're working with have a solid reputation for being able to close. And so there's real value there. For sure. Let's talk about, you mentioned that you have a passion for teaching others about the power of real estate investing. Can you talk about that and sort of maybe how you initially got into your own path to financial literacy and understanding financial freedom, and then now how you help others with that?
Totally. So I mean, I learned through, the Bigger Pockets playbook of reading the books, listening to the podcast, starting a meetup, become an agent. They laid down that path pretty clearly, and I followed that. Financial freedom is less about finances; it's more about time, right? We
Mm.
all want time freedom. We all want the ability to make our own schedule. We all don't want a boss to report to. We want the autonomy, right? That's what everybody wants, in my opinion, and that's what financial freedom gives me, or that's what I envision it will give me, is the time freedom to travel across the world on a drop of a dime, or help somebody in need when I want to help them in need, right? Like have the ability and the resources to do all of that and not have money in the back of my mind, or how am I going to pay my bill, right? That's financial independence to me. And how I really am going out of my way to help people is spreading the word, going on these podcasts, starting a meetup, educating others through that way, going on social media and providing educational information, having mentees, which I do have a couple mentees currently, and help them get their first, their second, their third investment property. Those are kind of ways that I plan on giving back, or I'm trying to give back right now.
No, I love that. I think Bigger Pockets provides such a great foundation for people to get education and understand just all the different ways that you can build wealth through real estate. And I think that was one of the great benefits that I had last year as I was transitioning from the military. We have this program called Skills Bridge where you can basically be like an intern for another business. And there's a local realtor broker here who basically brings a few folks every quarter to intern in his business. And his whole mission is to do exactly that. It's to share all the different ways that you can build wealth through real estate, whether it's becoming an agent, whether it's partnering in syndications, doing property management. I mean, the list goes on, residential versus commercial. There's so many different ways that you can approach it. And so helping people just have that awareness of like, there's so many different ways that you can do it. You don't necessarily need to quit your W-2 and go all in on real estate in order to leverage the wealth building benefits that it has. And so I love that, your approach to just educating people on all that it has to offer and, let them kind of figure out where they best fit into that and how they can take advantage of it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be where you are today without that broker guiding you through the power of real estate, right? So it's like
Exactly.
we almost feel a need to get back because other people have put their hand down to help us along the way.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I started doing this because I mean, I've been sort of active in the financial independence space for almost 5 years, consuming content, learning all the different strategies and all of that. And I had never heard about syndication before. And so for me, like going through that process with him where he's never done a deal as a general partner, but he had been a limited partner on a deal on like a local commercial property here, one of the big shopping centers. And so when he shared that with us, I was like, wait a minute, like normal people like us can buy properties like that. Like I just had no idea that that was even a possibility. And so that's a big part of now why like I have made it my mission to like tell as many people as possible that this is out there. And to me, like syndication for most people, I mean, not if you're going to be a general partner, but for the limited partners who are investing capital, it's one of the more truly passive ways to invest that's out there. And so the more people that I can make sure at least know that that's an option that's available to them, is a big part of why I do this as well.
Most people, they can only get in the 5 or 6 Bs, which that's when you're not an accredited investor. And the only way you're going to get into that is actually have a connection with the syndicator, right? So, I mean, I think that just brings up a whole larger point that finance in general, financial education is very much a hidden language in society. It's weaved, right? It's like I feel like many financial traditionalists, provide the wrong advice, like put your money in your 401k, let us hold on to it for 30, 40 years and don't think about while we collect fees. Meanwhile, the real wealth building is intertwined and hidden in society.
Yeah.
And syndications are an example of that. Like nobody knows of this, right? And for most people aren't accredited. The only way you can get into is knowing the right people.
Right.
So I think it's really important to educate people because now they know that this is a vehicle that they can go after and they can get the network with the right people to get access to these really cool investment opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah. You just brought up such a good point about, I like what you said about it being a hidden language. I haven't heard it put that way before, but I think that makes a lot of sense. And, it goes to like a whole nother step in terms of like creating wealth, like the way that our system is designed with most W-2 jobs is that you will need to have a job in order to be able to afford to live, right? And so it traps you in that, the rat race. You're on the hamster wheel. Like you could be making really good money, but it's still really hard to get off the hamster wheel because you need that constant infusion of that active income in order to be able to maintain the lifestyle that you've created. And it can be very difficult to figure out, how do I get off? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so building those relationships and just having that awareness that there is a different way to approach it. And, it could be through investing in real estate. It could be through owning a business. I think entrepreneurship in general lends itself much better to be able to create wealth and grow and expand. Whereas with your W-2, like there's only so much growth that's available there. And at the end of the day, you still always answer to somebody else. So I really like the way that you put that. So can you talk a little bit more about your goals for traveling? My family and I also love to travel. We've lived overseas a few times. I lived in Naples, Italy for almost 4 years when I was in the military. And then we lived together in Singapore. That was our most recent overseas duty station. We were there 2017 to 2020. We had both of our kids while we were living there. So that was an interesting experience in and of itself. But we've traveled quite a bit. So I love hearing from other folks in terms of like, what do you love about traveling? Where do you want to go? Like what's on your bucket list? Just, yeah, anything and everything you want to share about your passion for travel.
And what I love about traveling is it's almost like you're a kid again because everything's new. You're just like in exploring mode. Like it just puts you in a different mindset. It puts you in a different sort of perspective on the world, right? And yeah, I love that perspective. I love embracing myself in different cultures, different foods, different destinations, seeing some of those beautiful things in the world. One of my ultimate goals is to be a snowbird in Thailand, like have a condo in Thailand and live there during the winter, then live in, Massachusetts during the summer, the spring and the summer. That'd be one of my goals for sure. And somebody also recently put me on to this, they have like a world cruise that you could pay like 50, 100K and you can hit up like 190 destinations in a year. So that's definitely on there.
Yeah, I think I've heard about that recently came out. And originally when they first released it, it was like you had to get on at a certain point and get off at a certain point. There was like a beginning and an end, and it was like a cycle. But it sounds like they've been trying to restructure it where now it sort of can be this more like continuous thing where you can get on and get off wherever you want to. And yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing. I've done a couple of cruises. There are a few things that I love about them and a few things that I don't. The things that I love is you really can sort of maximize like the number of different places that you get to go and the different cultures that you get to experience. I think the thing that I don't love about them as much is it's hard to like fully experience the local culture when you're not getting to like spend overnights in the area. I feel like a lot of places have really interesting like evening events, or like even just going out for like a really nice dinner. A lot of places like dinner is later than what we're used to as Americans. And I feel like you miss out on some of that if you're on a cruise, because you have to be back on the ship by like 5 or 6 in order for them to leave to head to the next destination for the next day. But I think depending on how some of those cruises are organized, you know, they may pull in for a few days where you actually get to have that overnight experience. But yeah, that sounds really fun. Where is the favorite place that you've been so far, or
Halong
a
Bay
favorite place?
Halong Bay in Vietnam. Yeah, me and my family went there. I don't know, like 8, 9 years ago,
Okay.
and we rented a hotel boat with like 6, 8 rooms on the water with like a private chef for like $40 a day. And Halong Bay is the scene in Mission Impossible when Tom Cruise flies down and lands in the water. It's incredibly beautiful scene. It's actually like one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. But yeah, it was incredible. It looked like I was at like a screensaver for like a computer or something. It was crazy.
Oh, that's amazing. Halong Bay is definitely on my bucket list. It's one of the few places that I really thought I was going to get to go to when we were living in Singapore, and timing and everything just didn't work out to make it there. So it remains on my bucket list, but I hope to go there
Do
sometime soon.
do the hotel boat experience. It was by far worth it.
Awesome. And then what destination is like top of your bucket list that you're most looking forward to doing?
Tokyo. I love the
Okay.
food. I love the culture. I'm just excited to explore, and yeah, I mean, I love the technology. It's on the forefront, so
Awesome.
that's definitely up there for sure.
Nice. All right, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I love the example that you've given us that, you know, financial freedom is really whatever you want to make it to be, and that you don't have to follow a traditional path. You can figure out what lights you up, what brings you joy, and organize your life around that, to create that time and financial freedom that you talked about. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. I really like your attitude about giving back and sharing what you've learned with others as well to help empower them in their own financial freedom journeys. What is the best way for our guests to connect with you if they would like to continue following your journey?
Thank you. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be on your fantastic podcast. Regarding whether they can follow me, they can follow me at Investor Freed or on Instagram or Facebook at Andrew Freed. I'm very active. I'm always putting out free informational content. So come check me out.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing your wisdom with us today. We will definitely link to those in the show notes as well. And thank you to our wonderful listeners for tuning into this episode and for being a part of this community. If you found value in this episode, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Until next time, remember that your path to financial freedom and the life of your dreams might be closer than you think. Take that first step and explore your possibilities. Stay tuned for more insightful episodes. And again, thanks for listening.